The composer Princess Lydia Liliʻuokalani Wewe Kamaka Iha was born in 1838 into the highest echelons of the Hawaiian nobility. She was not in the direct line of succession, but was raised as a member of the royal family, or ali'i. In the court of King Kamehameha III, in the Hawaiian tradition of Hanai, she was adopted at birth by another high-ranking chief and his wife, a practice that strengthened the bonds among the ruling families. From a young age, she was immersed in two worlds. She was educated by American missionaries, becoming a fluent English speaker and a devout Christian. At the same time, she was a deep student of her own people's language, culture, and traditions. Her greatest passion was music. She was a gifted and prolific composer, and her life's work would be to masterfully blend the melodies of traditional Hawaiian chants with the harmonies of Western hymns. Over her lifetime, she would compose over 150 songs, the most famous of which, Aloha O, Farewell to Thee, would become a mournful anthem for her lost kingdom. As a young woman, she was known for her intelligence, dignity, and grace. She married an American official, John Owen Dominguez, and took her place as a high-ranking princess, deeply involved in charitable work, particularly in education for young Hawaiian girls. When her brother, David Kalakaua, was elected to the throne in 1874, she was named his heir apparent, and her life changed forever. As Crown Princess Liliʻuokalani, she traveled the world as a royal ambassador, attending Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in England and meeting with President Grover Cleveland in the United States. She was a sophisticated and worldly stateswoman, preparing to lead her nation with a vision of a proud, modern, and independent Hawaii. The Bayonet Constitution, the Hawaii that Liliʻuokalani was set to inherit, was a kingdom in crisis. For decades, American and European businessmen, primarily the descendants of missionaries, had been growing immensely wealthy and powerful through the cultivation of sugar. These sugar planters, known as the Sugar Ring, came to dominate the Hawaiian economy and legislature. They saw the Hawaiian monarchy and its commitment to native land rights as an obstacle to their ultimate goal, the annexation of Hawaii by the United States, which would grant them duty-free access to the lucrative American sugar market. In 1887, this cabal of white businessmen, backed by their own private militia called the Honolulu Rifles, made their move. They forced King Kalakaua, under threat of violence, to sign a new constitution. This document became known as the Bayonet Constitution because it was signed under duress. It was a legal coup that stripped the monarchy of most of its executive power and transferred that power to the cabinet, which was controlled by the sugar interests. Crucially, it also disenfranchised the majority of the native Hawaiian population by imposing strict property and income requirements for voting, while simultaneously granting suffrage to wealthy foreign residents. King Kalakaua was reduced to a figurehead, and the political power of the Hawaiian people was stolen from them. Liliʻuokalani watched these events with a growing sense of outrage and resolve. She saw the Bayonet Constitution for what it was, a theft of her people's sovereignty. When her brother died in 1891 while on a trip to San Francisco, she ascended to the throne, not as the powerful monarch she had expected to be, but as the leader of a kingdom already under foreign domination. Hawaii for the Hawaiians, Queen Liliʻuokalani's reign began with a groundswell of popular support from her native subjects. They saw in their new queen their last best hope. Petitions flooded the palace, signed by thousands of native Hawaiians, pleading with her to abolish the hated Bayonet Constitution and restore a just government that represented its own people. Her motto became Onipa, stand firm. Empowered by this popular mandate, the queen began to act. She was not an anti-American radical. She simply believed in a constitutional monarchy where the monarch retained a meaningful role and where the right to vote belonged to the citizens of the nation, not just to a wealthy foreign elite. She and her advisors began drafting a new constitution that would restore the power of the monarchy to what it had been before 1887, and most importantly, restore voting rights to the disenfranchised native Hawaiian and Asian populations. Her intention was to promulgate this new constitution on January 14, 1893, to the American and European business community. This was an intolerable act. A restored monarchy and an empowered native electorate would threaten their grip on the island's land and economy. They saw the Queen's attempt to restore her people's rights as a revolutionary act that required an immediate and decisive response. The final confrontation was at hand. The Committee of Safety and the landing of the Marines, fearing the loss of their political and economic dominance, the architects of the Bayonet Constitution decided that the time for a full-fledged coup had arrived. They formed a 13-member council, calling themselves the Committee of Safety. This group, composed entirely of American and European businessmen, and led by a lawyer named Lawrence Thurston, had one goal: to overthrow the Queen, abolish the monarchy, and secure the annexation of Hawaii by the United States. To achieve this, they needed military backing. They turned to the United States Minister to Hawaii, John L. Stevens, a man who was an ardent imperialist and a close friend of the sugar planters. Stevens was a key co-conspirator. Citing a fabricated threat to American lives and property, he made a fateful and illegal decision. On the afternoon of January 16, 1893, without authorization from Washington, he ordered the landing of over 160 fully armed U.S. Marines and sailors from the USS Boston, which was anchored in Honolulu Harbor. The American troops did not protect American property. Instead, they marched through the city and took up strategic positions directly across from Liliʻuokalani Palace, the Queen's official residence. Their presence was not neutral. It was an explicit act of intimidation, a clear signal that the United States military was backing the insurrectionists. The Committee of Safety now had the muscle it needed to topple a sovereign government. The overthrow the next day, January 17, 1893, the coup unfolded. The Committee of Safety, protected by the menacing presence of the U.S. Marines, marched to the government building and proclaimed the end of the Hawaiian monarchy. They declared themselves the Provisional Government, with Sanford B. Dole, a prominent lawyer and son of a missionary, as its president. The entire affair was conducted without a single shot being fired. Queen Liliʻuokalani was faced with an impossible choice. Her royal guard was small but fiercely loyal and ready to fight. She knew that any armed resistance would be futile against the overwhelming firepower of the U.S. military. A battle would not save her kingdom. It would only lead to a bloodbath and the slaughter of her beloved people. Acting with what she believed was the only responsible choice, she decided to yield her authority, not to the illegitimate provisional government, but to the United States itself. She penned a formal letter of protest, a remarkable document written with both dignity and defiance. It read, in part, "I, Liliʻuokalani, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps the loss of life, I do under this protest and impelled by said force yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon facts being presented to it, undo the action of its representatives and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands." She had not abdicated. She had entrusted the fate of her nation to the justice of the American government. The imprisonment in the palace. Liliʻuokalani's faith in American justice was at first seemingly well placed. When President Grover Cleveland, an anti-imperialist, took office, he withdrew an annexation treaty submitted by the plotters and ordered an investigation. The resulting Blount report was a scathing indictment of the overthrow, confirming that Minister Stevens and the U.S. Marines had acted illegally to help topple a friendly, sovereign government. Cleveland called the overthrow an act of war and began to work towards restoring the Queen to her throne. However, the provisional government in Honolulu, led by Dole, flatly refused to step down, with the U.S. unwilling to use force to remove the government it had helped to create. A political stalemate ensued. In 1894, Dole's government declared itself the Republic of Hawaii, an independent nation in name, but a thinly veiled oligarchy run by the sugar planters. Waiting for a more favorable political climate in Washington. In 1895, a small group of royalists staged a desperate and poorly planned counter-revolution. The attempt failed miserably. In the aftermath, the Republic of Hawaii used the uprising as a pretext to crush the last vestiges of royalist sentiment. Queen Liliʻuokalani, though she had no part in the plot, was arrested. In a humiliating spectacle, she was subjected to a public trial in the throne room of her own palace. She was found guilty of misprision of treason and sentenced to 5 years of hard labor, a sentence that was later commuted. For nearly 8 months, the last Queen of Hawaii was held as a prisoner in a single sparsely furnished upstairs bedroom of Aulani Palace, the grand home her brother had built as a symbol of Hawaiian modernity. During this lonely confinement, she composed music and on sheets of newspaper stitched a magnificent quilt that serves as a poignant, secret history of her life and her nation's overthrow. Aloha O, farewell to a kingdom to save her supporters. From the gallows and under immense pressure, Liliʻuokalani was finally forced to sign a formal document of abdication in 1895, officially renouncing her claim to the throne. Though she was eventually released, she never stopped fighting for her people's sovereignty. She traveled to Washington, D.C. to personally lobby against annexation, presenting petitions signed by nearly every native Hawaiian man and woman, a powerful testament to their opposition. Her efforts, and those of the Hawaiian people, were ultimately in vain. In 1898, with the imperialist-friendly William McKinley in the White House, and the Spanish-American War stoking a fervor for overseas expansion, the United States formally annexed Hawaii through a joint resolution of Congress, bypassing the need for a treaty that the plotters knew they could never get ratified. The Hawaiian flag was lowered from Iolani Palace and replaced by the Stars and Stripes. Liliʻuokalani retreated into private life at her home, Washington Place, a beloved and revered figure for her people, a living symbol of their lost independence. She died in 1917. Her funeral was a spectacular display of Hawaiian grief and pageantry, a final farewell to a sovereign world that had vanished. Her most famous song, Aloha O, composed years earlier as a lover's farewell, had taken on a new, heartbreaking meaning. It had become the farewell of a queen to her people, and the farewell of a people to their nation.